In the early 7th century, the Arabian Peninsula was an isolated, harsh desert expanse. The people here were organized into fractured, nomadic tribes. They relied on idol worship and blood feuds, entirely decentralized and lacking a unified political structure. Beyond these deserts, the rest of the known world was locked in a brutal stalemate. To the east lay the Sassanid Persian Empire, an ancient, highly structured state. To the north, it's at the Roman Empire. This was a highly organized, heavily militarized global superpower, projecting authority through massive fortifications and vast legions. Arabia was effectively a power vacuum, squeezed between these two warring leviathans. Into this vacuum stepped a merchant from Mecca named Muhammad. He began preaching a strict message of monotheism. His teachings demanded absolute equality among believers, rejecting the tribal hierarchies and status symbols of the elite. This message immediately drew in the marginalized, the poor, and the enslaved. The ruling Meccan oligarchs derived their absolute political power and vast wealth from housing hundreds of tribal idols in the Kaaba. This made Mecca the economic engine of the peninsula. A message of monotheism and strict social equality directly threatened the revenue and authority of those ruling families. The Meccan elite responded with immediate violence. They subjected the early Muslims to severe physical persecution, economic boycotts, and torture, attempting to crush the movement entirely before it could spread beyond the city walls. This escalation culminated in a coordinated assassination plot against the Prophet, with assassins drawn from every major Meccan tribe. Realizing the danger, Muhammad initiated a high-stakes midnight escape, slipping out of the city and making the perilous journey north toward the city of Medina. This photograph shows the structures of early Medina. Upon arriving here, the strategic approach shifted. Muhammad negotiated a binding mutual defense pact with the local Arab and Jewish tribes. They agreed that an attack on any single group would be treated as an attack on the entire city. By mediating long-standing tribal wars and establishing a central administrative authority to manage property trusts and common defense, the community began operating as a sovereign entity. These frameworks allowed Medina to function as a unified political state for the first time. 2 years after the migration, the Muslims faced a severe military test. This topographical map details the Battle of Badr, where an outnumbered force of 313 Muslims confronted a Meccan army of 1,000 soldiers. The Muslims arrived early and seized control of the vital water sources, forcing the Meccans to fight uphill through soft sand. By forcing the engagement into this narrow topographical choke point, the Muslims completely nullified the Meccan numerical advantage. The Meccan lines collapsed, resulting in a crushing, highly unexpected defeat for the peninsula's ruling oligarchy. The Meccans retaliated a year later at Mount Uhud, seen here. The Muslims initially held off a force 3 times their size. However, 50 Muslim archers stationed on the high ground saw the enemy retreating. Assuming the battle was won, 35 of those archers disobeyed explicit orders and left their positions to gather spoils. An astute Meccan cavalry commander, Khalid bin Walid, noticed the abandoned high ground. He immediately wheeled his cavalry around the back of the mountain, flanking the exposed Muslim infantry. The resulting ambush inflicted devastating casualties, nearly killing the Prophet himself. The heavy losses at Uhud proved that religious fervor alone could not win battles. Survival against a superior enemy required absolute structural discipline, strategic foresight, and unwavering adherence to the chain of command. Determined to finish the Muslims permanently, the Meccans spent the next 2 years assembling a massive coalition of 10,000 soldiers from various tribes. Their goal was to march on Medina and wipe the nascent state off the map entirely. Facing certain destruction, the Muslims adopted a radical defensive innovation suggested by a Persian convert. Because Medina was surrounded by mountains on 3 sides, only the northern front was exposed. The defenders spent weeks digging a massive, uncrossable trench across this entire front line. When the 10,000-strong coalition arrived, their cavalry was rendered useless by the trench. But the siege turned desperate when local tribes inside Medina, who had signed the Mutual Defense Pact, broke their agreement. They allied with the Meccans, trapping the Muslims between a massive army outside and a hostile force within, leaving their families completely exposed. The deadlock was broken by intelligence warfare. A recent secret convert named Nuaym bin Masood offered his services. Operating under the cover of his former alliances, he visited both the Meccans and the internal mutineers. He carefully planted rumors and demanded hostages from both sides to prove their loyalty, effectively sowing deep distrust. The internal alliance fractured. Combined with severe weather destroying their camps, the exhausted Meccan coalition eventually retreated. Surviving the trench proved that Medina could withstand the combined might of Arabia, permanently shifting the geopolitical balance of power. In 628, the Muslims marched toward Mecca to perform a pilgrimage. Instead of fighting, Muhammad negotiated the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. He shocked his own followers by accepting heavily one-sided terms in favor of the Meccans, all to secure a 10-year truce. This agreement legally recognized Medina as an independent sovereign power for the first time. The guaranteed neutrality allowed the state to reallocate military resources away from the southern border and send diplomatic envoys across the region to secure new alliances. With their southern border secure, the Muslims pivoted their military attention northward. They marched on the wealthy, hostile stronghold seen here, the fortress of Khyber. After a grueling siege, the Muslims decisively defeated the local oligarchs, claiming immense resources. The expansion soon met its ultimate obstacle. After an emissary was executed, an expeditionary force of 3,000 Muslims marched north into the Battle of Mu'tah. There, they collided with the heavily armored legions of the Roman Empire, a force numbering up to 100,000 men. Facing total annihilation, the newly appointed commander, Khalid bin Walid, executed a brilliant series of troop realignments that convinced the Romans a massive reinforcement was arriving. The Romans pulled back, allowing the Muslim army to retreat safely. Surviving this clash signaled to the surrounding tribes that this new state was capable of challenging global empires. The 10-year truce with Mecca did not last. When allied Meccan tribes attacked a group under Muslim protection, the treaty was legally voided. This breach handed Muhammad the precise justification he needed to march on Mecca, this time with an overwhelming force of 10,000 soldiers. Looking out over the vast Muslim army, the Meccan elite realized they had been completely outmaneuvered geopolitically. Facing an unwinnable siege, the leadership surrendered the city without a fight, resulting in a remarkably bloodless conquest of the region's capital. With Mecca secured, one final internal purge was necessary. Rumors of a Roman invasion prompted the expedition of Tabuk. The grueling journey across the summer desert served as a deliberate stress test. It effectively exposed those within the ranks whose loyalty was purely opportunistic, solidifying the state's internal cohesion. By absorbing the political power of Mecca and securing the northern borders against Roman incursions, the Islamic State achieved total military and economic hegemony over the entire Arabian Peninsula. Shortly after returning to Medina and having completed the consolidation of the peninsula, Prophet Muhammad passed away in 632 CE. This harsh desert environment had been fractured by tribal warfare for centuries, yet in the span of a single lifetime, a marginalized exile managed to forge a massive, unified political and military powerhouse. The centralized taxation and judicial appointments and organized military logistics developed during these years provided the systems that managed the state's rapid growth. These mechanisms remained in place long after the Prophet's death. The expansion that followed dismantled the Sassanid Empire and ended Roman control over the Levant. This shift in the global power center toward Medina established a new world order that would endure for centuries.